Hello there. Not only do they deserve a real pay rise, the UK Armed Forces also deserve to be treated much better than this. While ministers go on their generous Christmas holes with their generous pay and their generous expenses into their warm, dry and mould-free houses, the people they've drafted in to cover the work the better-paid strikers should be doing are left out in the cold and damp to moulder. And the Times gives us the stark truth behind the awful accommodation that some service families have to endure. And while they endure it, they get given no real help or comfort. In short, the families of service people, the partners and the children, are expected to be as hardy as the soldier in the field, living in bivvies and foxholes while eating from ration packs heated over field stoves. While at the first hint of anything less than a 4-star hotel or free house for an English Channel visitor attracts a swarm of do-gooder pro bono lawyers and a showering of compensation from the government. And if they're not pro bono lawyers, then there's always a well-heeled charity out there to foot the bill. Where are these lawyers when you need them to help those who put it on the line for the nation? Presumably there's no PR in that for them. Or it goes against their collective lefty principles to help people in the armed forces. For example, families left with mould in their home, roofs that leak or a broken boiler could get the princely sum of £1 a day in compensation. Water streaming through ceilings, and when the house becomes uninhabitable, the family gets a £25 a day hotel voucher. Can you imagine the outcry if the government decided to put our English Channel visitors into that accommodation? Now, this service accommodation is looked after by a government contractor, which, according to the Times report, responded to the recent cold weather by setting up an emergency helpline with an automated response that told families to use hot water bottles or warm flannels. But at least the recent angry responses to this situation has stung the contractor concerned into upping the £1 a day to £20 per day for the loss of heating, backdated to the 7th of December. But they won't be able to claim it until the 3rd of January because the website needs updating. But that is still far below what these families should be getting, a safe, warm and dry home with a fast response to problems. Now, the government website runs a page on all of this, and it now has constant updates on these emerging problems and what's being done about them. And it appears to me that this is the first time we've seen updates on these winter-related problems. And the Pinnacle Group took on a £144 million contract to be responsible for providing accommodation services to 49,000 service family accommodation homes from March 2022. But I do have to ask, is the MOD itself checking on the accommodation being given to the Crown's employees, or has it been totally outsourced, with the government washing its hands of the whole kit and caboodle? The Times says that thousands of service families have been affected by accommodation problems this year, and that Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, has been bending the ears of the companies responsible about it, with the MOD saying the Defence Secretary and Defence Ministers held a meeting yesterday with the heads of Pinnacle, Amey and Vivo to address the ongoing problems with service family accommodation. It is completely unacceptable that some of our personnel and their families are not receiving the level of accommodation services that they deserve. Completely unacceptable. No brown stuff detective. The armed forces are the ones that deserve the hefty pay rise, ever being the first and last resort, with no complaints or strikes allowed. Now, I wonder how many MPs and Lords have interests in those aforementioned companies. And now we find out that the UK is far more generous than France when handing out acceptances for asylum claims. In fact, 3 times more generous. And the Telegraph reports that the proportion granted has risen from 34% in 2016 to 77% in 2021, ending up with the UK among the top 5 in Europe in this regard, and France being the 5th lowest. And this is backed up by a Home Office report called Sovereign Borders: International Asylum Comparisons, which puts one possible driver for the irregular English Channel route into the UK as France is reported to be failing in practice to meet its obligation to provide accommodation to all asylum seekers, with only 52% of eligible asylum seekers accommodated at the end of 2019. Many asylum seekers in France are forced to live in informal makeshift camps in the absence of access to official accommodation. Now, this report from September 2020 is for Home Office analysis and insight and is marked as official, sensitive, internal use only. And it also says under the heading, Reception conditions in France, a possible driver for onward movement towards the UK. For those living in these makeshift camps, life is often uncertain and precarious, with camp clearances and forced evictions that can lead to damage and confiscation of personal belongings and reported police brutality and abusive practices. There is often limited access to water and sanitation facilities, while many depend on local associations for food distributions. This may act as a factor driving onward movement out of France. Now, this report is very careful to stress that only some migrants want to come to the UK from France, not all. However, remember that this report was written in 2020, well before the sudden surge in irregular channel crossings. But if the numbers we are seeing are anything to go by, then if only some come here, then there must be hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in France looking to go somewhere else. So why do they end up in France, would be my question. Now, this report was put together by Home Office Analysis and Insight, or HOAI, and it seeks to address ministerial questions and embed them into a wider programme that protects the vulnerable and reduces abuse of the systems designed to do so. And it says that in 2019, the UK only accepted 6% of total asylum applications across the EU plus countries, which I take to be the EU 27 plus another 6 countries surrounding the EU, including the UK. And on reading the report, you can see why, if they are basing their decisions on this insight material, ministers are talking tough but doing little except facilitate. So no wonder I found a copy of the document on a website called freemovement.org.uk. Now, the Home Office says that the HOAI, the body that wrote this report, brings together economists, statisticians, operational and social researchers, intelligence analysts and others. We are part of science, technology, analysis and research, delivering high-quality analysis and insight to support the department in delivering its objectives. Now, this report goes on at length to stress the cost and impact all of this has on those wishing to leave their country of birth or residence. But the worrying omission within it is the lack of comment or insight on the impact and cost this has on the UK and its citizens. It is being put forward as a purely benign issue, something that we should just accept and have no concerns with. And when the irregular channel crossings were minor before the report was written in 2020, then this whole issue could be kept under the radar. But now that it's a burgeoning industry and very public indeed. Now, in the final analysis, voters elect politicians into power, a democratic means by which the majority get to set the general agenda and direction of national travel. but it is those that write these types of reports that wield the ultimate power, as demonstrated by the talk tough, do little stance taken by successive governments over irregular migration. It is the minority interests using nudge units that always get their own way. And how many other sensitive reports like this litter our ministries? And finally, when subscribing, please don't forget to press that little bell and also select the all option, or you won't get any notifications when I publish a new video. And thank you all so much for taking the time to watch the show.